All right, welcome to the Stampscapes lab. We're going to do a quick card here featuring one of the new designs, one of the newest designs from Stampscapes in a setting created with some older designs, okay? So this is one of the largest art rubber stamps in the world right here, called the Seaside Cove. It's 139H. And I am stamping it onto a piece of semi-gloss, 4¼ by 5½ quarter size piece of cardstock. Could be matte cardstock, could be glossy cardstock. The semi-gloss is pretty good, kind of a in-between type of surface. It really stamps really smooth because it is coated a little bit. They call it satin coat or dull coat sometimes, in addition, to refer to the semi-gloss format of it. But it really gives you really clean impressions. But it's not so glossy that you can't use things like colored pencils on it. Okay, now we're going to use this in conjunction with these horses running with these reflections, okay? And I'm going to show you how to do it in a horizon card format. You've heard me mention reflection cards, and reflection cards is where you use a mirrored cardstock. Now that would be really dynamic, and I'm planning on doing that many times in the future, but I thought I haven't done a horizon card in a while, so I'm just stamping the Seaside Cove down here, which you could stamp onto a piece of silver cardstock, but instead of using dye-based ink, you would use something like a StazOn ink for this purpose. Okay, so anything that has a reflection on it or a shadow like this, it's really a fun opportunity for utilizing that surface as this area of the card. So when I say horizon card, it's because that's the horizon line out there. So this is represents the kind of the horizontal flat surface of whatever land or water, and going up like that would be kind of the sky or something like that. Okay, in this case it is the sky. Brought to you by the Deanna Tubb-Sedilllo designer background papers. Really fun to use. This is a 4¼ by 5½ as well. So this is all formatted onto a piece of 8½ by 5½ cardstock, or 8½ by 11, folded in half. So 4¼ by, quarter size card base, we should say. I did it on a piece of black paper. All right, so how do you use the shadows and the main objects that are casting the shadows? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on a block like that, just so I can see where that shadow starts, okay? And stamping on this. Now, this is a piece of printed paper because it has these different backgrounds on there. So I'm going to aim this roughly like this, right on the surface, so you can see this matches up with this edge right here, okay? And on these papers like this, I like to use a little bit of a thicker ink to stamp those out. So you can use like a, like a VersaFine Clair, or in this case, just a, any type of black pigment ink. It just gives a little bit of a thicker impression onto these types of pre-printed papers. Now on this one right here, there's not a lot of ink in this white cloud area, but I still want to get a nice deep thick impression on there. So we'll ink up accordingly like this. Now I'm not inking up this bottom portion like this, because this is like hanging out, because I'm going to put those shadows onto this portion right here. So it looks like the shadows are actually on a surface, okay? So let's see here. Like this. I'm pressing down. I'm holding a little bit longer than I would on a non-printed paper just to make sure that ink transfers over to this surface right here. It's a little bit more important, if there's a lot of printed ink on there. Like maybe the darker sky ones. Deanna has some really cool moon ones, things like that. And with those ones, they're heavier with the inks. Okay, now here's one of those things. Right here, I'm going to try to match up. I guess I could have just stamped out this whole thing and just kind of aimed it right in between there. Sometimes you might get a little bit of a line in between, but so this one right here, I'm just going to kind of eyeball it like that and then stamp that on down there. Okay, now this is just on the semi-gloss, so I'm going to go back to my dye-based ink. You could stamp with a pigment ink on this surface right here too, but I'm going to go to the dye just because it'll dry a little bit faster than a thicker style of ink. Okay, so let's just get this lined up like this. I'm going to line it up like so. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can line it up and take this out, okay? And then just go down like so. Get that in there like that. Okay, and we have this right here. And what this is going to look like is this. Look at that right there. So you have these shadows actually going out at that angle like that. See that? Now this is going to all get colored right down in here. I'm going to allow this to dry for a little bit before I start coloring it though. But I tell you what, before we do that, I think what I'm going to do is I'll add in some extra texturing and we'll add some background images on there too. But see this area right down in here. Let's fill this in with a little bit more texture before we get to that coloring. I like to give this a little bit of a vignette, so I'm taking this Tiny Rocks small stamp, 329A. And I'm adding more on the perimeter, okay? And then as you stamp out a few impression, it gets drier, and then you move it into this light. So it looks like it's kind of lit up right in this area. And I guess why don't we do a little bit of foreground in here while we're at it. Add a little bit more on the sides. And then what you do is you start angling the grasses in like this, okay? Then you start going like that. So everything's kind of pointing into the scene. A little bit denser out on the sides like this, and then you kind of start angling it in like that. All right, so this portion is done, and it just needs some coloring. And I tell you what, I mean, we can just leave that. It looks kind of, I don't know, contemplative or something like that without anything else on the horizon. But I think I want to add a little bit more, I don't know, fullness to the composition with, some added depth. I don't want to just stamp just those horses on there and, that's that, okay. I'm going to use the dye-based inks for this one. If these trees come out a little bit lighter, in value, that might be all, for the better. Or we can actually kind of dry them off a little bit. I'm just going to stamp a little bit of these trees coming in from each left and right side to just kind of frame off our horses. But yeah, why don't we kind of take some of this ink off? Okay, I mentioned this before in my live stream. Sometimes it's like I'm adding a lot of white pigment ink, to look like fog or something like that on objects as my last I don't know, kind of technique that I'm applying. But sometimes if you take off some ink to begin with, just so it's lighter where I would be applying some of that white ink, you just give yourself a little bit of a head start, okay? So you see that when they're kind of lighter like that, it looks like it's farther off in the distance. The lighter kind of the value the objects are, it usually represents something that's more distant because there's more, you know, kind of mist and moisture, sediment in the air. Okay, and I just inked up this side right here, and I'm kind of taking off some ink off the bottom like this and about halfway up, but you take off more off the bottom portion. So that transitions from drier to wetter. And that drier portion is stamping out lighter like that, okay? So it goes from the lighter up usually. You know, like some low line fog or mist. In this case, it's this body of water. Could be the ocean, I don't know, lake. All right, so we have something like that there. I think this will be really good with a quote stamp. And what I'll do while I'm waiting for this to dry, I'll look for an interesting quote stamp, because when you have these kind of like open skies up here, it's like a good thing to put something else up there that can add to the emotional kind of weight of the piece, okay? So what this is looking like right now is this right here. This is our structure like that. I'll show you what it looks like in a reflection card format. It looks like this. So you get those extra trees down there. It's a little bit more, I don't know, well, certainly reflective, but really dynamic too. So it looks like that. But we'll give this some extra zip and visual weight with adding some color down here. I'm going to give this a few minutes to dry, and I'll do a little heat setting on here because I plan on using a lot of colors in here just to kind of match the tones of the sky. We won't go too heavy down here, but I don't know, we'll just see how it goes. But we'll come back with that in, I don't know, probably 5 minutes or so. Okay, I have heat set this, and I have found what I think will be a good quote to go with this. Let's see. I'm trying to decide where I want it to go. We have this slanted cloud, like cumulus cloud right here. So I think right over here to the side would kind of counterbalance that, but going right in the middle would be okay too, I think. So we do have some options here. But I thought I would stamp this out right now and get just all the stamping done. I'm not going to be doing too much of this top portion, so we can do that and be done with that up there. For the most part, I plan on doing a little tweaks on my horse impressions, but for the most part, we can put this one aside after I do the quote stamp. All right, forgive my head here. I do like to get these ones reasonably well positioned so they're not kind of at an angle, you know, like word stamps or quote stamps. Unless it's like a scripty, real loopy scripty one. You want to keep these fairly straight. But how fiercely, devoutly wild is nature in the midst of her beauty, loving tenderness. I thought that was a pretty powerful quote stamp. This comes off the Scenic Sentiment set. I just used the Love Must Be a Light, as much a light as it is a flame quote stamp for my Valentine's Day card. All right, let's get to some coloring here. Semi-gloss card, so we can do all kinds of different colors on here with dye-based inks or whatever. I thought I would just go with some markers here and try that out. Okay, I have some alcohol markers here, some gray tones, some blue tones. I don't know how deep I'll go with the blue in terms of the the alcohol markers, but I don't know, that looks a little bit bright. But I also have some colored pencils here, okay? Blue tones. So my lighter tones I think I'll hit with some of my alcohol markers here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this in the shaded areas here first, okay? So you can see on the stamp design itself, there are some darker areas. So I'm kind of largely staying away from the lightest of areas, the pure white areas. You don't have to be like so, whatever, meticulous with it, or careful to not get anything on there, okay? It's not like we're being that careful with it, all right? But just in general, with this first color at least, when you get darker, then we'll get a little bit more selective with our color addition. Now, I do like to go with kind of a darker perimeter around the side, so if there's like some light areas around here, like pure white, I might color them out. Get some tone kind of within this space in here too. So this is probably like I don't know, 5% gray or something like that, so it's pretty light. All right, so makes pretty quick work of it. I don't know, let's see, this is a warm gray right here. Let's see what color that is. It doesn't look like the cap at all. Look at that. But we'll do a little bit of warm grays down in this sandy area like this. I'm dragging in some of the ink just because it's a little bit wet. Alcohol and water are not going to mix, but if the ink's a little bit, wet, it might drag a touch. Here's a little bit of another warm gray right here. Okay, like that. Looks almost like flesh tone or something like that, so I'll just add a little bit down like that. See this right here? It's a little bit darker underneath the lip of the wave, a little bit darker around the surrounding areas, but I'll leave a lit, illuminated area towards the center. And let's see, let's move on to another gray here. I'll go with the fat tip right here. And it's a little bit of a jump or bump up from the previous layer of gray on here. Get that rock. All right, pretty fast work of that. And let's see, I think I had oh, there's that warm gray. Let's try this blue here. We'll find a blue that's somewhat similar to that one. This one's a really light one, I guess. Not only is it light, it's fairly dry. I'll put that one away. That one's pretty dark in comparison to the previous one, so I won't go too much with this one. That's a little bit much, but what I'll do is I'll go back to my lighter tone. And while that's still a little bit wet, what we'll do is we'll blend that out a touch. It doesn't blend out great on the, this absorbent, semi-absorbent semi-gloss cardstock, but it's enough right here. And then remember, we're going to be doing a lot of colored pencil work on here. Maybe I shouldn't seal it off too much with all these alcohol pens, inks, before I go to these ones right here. So let's move into that. Well, they still have a little bit of a tooth to grab onto, so texture. If you start laying down too much alcohol ink, sometimes the pencils can't, they don't have much to grab onto in terms of texture, so it's hard to apply them. So I'll try not to do too much of that. Alcohol, maybe we'll oscillate a little bit back and forth. I'll put on some pencils, then maybe we go back on with some alcohol just to smooth things out a little bit. I'll try to transition the little area underneath the lip of the wave, the crest, like that, right in there. Sometimes the brightest of color intensity is in the shadows, so I make my shadows fairly, you know, they're just darker, but they're also more intense most of the time, I would say. Okay, let's see what Deanna did here with her blues. We'll see if it's just a straight blue or if she's used a little bit of like a warm blue in here. I can't really tell. It looks like there's even a little bit of a pinkish tone right there, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, let's go with another blue right in here. Just try to add to the richness. This is a little bit of a lighter blue. Maybe we can do some blending. Okay, and here's another blue, a little bit of a darker blue. I like these kind of striations coming across just to break up, you know, kind of the tonal monotony. And in water, you know, you would typically have some, am I out of focus here? Let's see, there we go. Okay, so I was looking for, to see if there's a little bit of warmth in there. And I think there could be, like maybe on this side, there, I don't know. It could be the printing, but I have a feeling there's a little bit of warmth in there. So I'm going to add a little bit of green right over here, just to kind of reflect, I don't know, what I think I'm seeing up there a little bit. You see that little greenish tinge right there? But see that little pink tinge right there? I wonder if, I think, I don't know, Deanna might have added in like these really super subtle little hue changes. So I'm going to take that and see right around in here where I've retained a little bit of that white. Maybe I'll put a little bit of this pinkish tone or violets right in this area right here. Maybe where it's kind of doing this little iridescent kind of reflection of this in the sky. Maybe. I might be seeing things, or her pieces are skies are pretty evocative, you know. So I might be seeing things. All right, so let's add a little bit of warmth to this sandy area right down in here, and it'll kind of blend out some of my streakiness with my alcohol marker additions. Here's a little bit of brown tinge. I don't want to make it look too brown, but it's a little bit of a change in hue, temperature more, like that. All right, let's take a look here and see what we're looking at. Okay. So we have our water like that. Looks pretty decent there. I think it's time for our effects. It's a pretty quick card, you know, relatively speaking. Let's see. Let's add in some pigment. I got a little impression right there, so while I was waiting for things to dry, this are some of the first times I've used these stamps right here, but I've just trimmed into this area a little bit closer so I won't get that ink overprint right there. So you ever get something like that, you just kind of mark it out with some, in this case, a acrylic paint pen here. But here, see, where I wasn't quite so careful about my placement of inks or, the alcohol inks or colored pencil, it's because I can go back in and I can add in, reclaim some lighter or white areas with my paint pen, like this. So you don't have to be so meticulous, it comes out more, sometimes a little bit more spirited too when you're kind of working like this way. You can go out of the lines, with scenic stamping, with some additional marks that you might want to add in there in the form of extra texturing, highlights like this. See this down here? I mean, it looks okay. It's a good tonal transition, but, if you have kind of lighting and it's wet, things tend to shimmer a little bit. So this is kind of putting the shimmer back into it. I'm adding in kind of a little bit more dots down here, which would be like little flashes of light or something like that. And then as I move it out towards the end, I'm adding less like this. So it goes from a little bit more shimmer to less shimmer out here. Now, when these little dots of ink dry, or paint, I should say, acrylic paint, they're going to look a little bit darker, okay? Because they become more see-through. Like, you can see that little mark coming out, so I'm going to put another layer right over that. So you can kind of, I don't know, you can go kind of crazy with this, and it might kind of stand out a little bit too much. It's like crawling with little white dots, but it kind of, I don't know, it merges a little bit. It harmonizes, I guess, with that background, because it just, as the paint dries, it gets a little bit more see-through. It doesn't become like completely transparent or anything, but it just kind of mellows out a little bit. All paint brands, I'm sure, paint pens are a little bit different. Some might be a little bit more opaque, I'm not sure. Okay, so we got that. You can see where I've applied it. You can say I've kind of gone to town with it, like that, with all these little dots like that. See all those little dots in there? It looks kind of like that. One thing I'm looking at it right now is I didn't kind of develop my shadows all the way, because I didn't go all the way to black. Let me see if I have a black colored pencil here. This will just kind of develop my gray, my grayscale a little bit more in here. I won't go too much. Well, we'll just see here. I'm not really using it to create a black mark in here, but I'm using it more for, like a 10% gray or 20% gray, just by putting on, a small amount of it like this. If I stamp out my objects in black, I usually finish in black, which means I'm finishing black most of the time. So it has a little bit more body to it, doesn't it? All right, let's go to some white pigment ink. We added in some really specific little shimmery areas of white. Now I'm going to add this kind of a misty white, and to give it a little bit more kind of essence in here. White pigment ink, okay? Cotton ball, 100% cotton ball. The acrylic style cotton balls, they just don't work. They wick moisture as opposed to absorbing moisture. Smash it down like this. See, like this, so you get a nice flat thing. It's not all frayed. Okay? And then just kind of condense it like this, okay? Now you don't want a big sloppy wet application of white. You want it to be fairly light and almost like a dry brushing type of effect. See this shadow right here? I'm kind of altering it just from straight dark black. Now it's kind of like a transitioning grayscale, you know, so you get a little bit of lighter and darker like that, or light, medium, dark like that. The shadows are usually the darkest next to the objects that are casting the shadow, okay? But see that it looks a little bit more shimmery like that now, or kind of realistic. Okay, unless you're going for something like really dramatic, you know, where it's like really harsh contrast, which, you know, could be cool too. I used to like a lot of just like black and white contrast, you know, super contrasty in my younger days. Okay, so see this right down here? See how it's kind of a little bit misty down here too? It gives the surface a little bit more motion, I would say, than just like a harsh, you know, kind of a lighting on. See, even right there, it looks a little bit more diffuse. See, it looks different from over here. But you can have both of them like that, you know, one way and another like that, just to contrast. So I put some pigment ink here, none here, and a little bit over here, okay? Just to create those contrasts, you want textural contrast. So if you like it soft, then keep some areas sharp, okay? Because it'll kind of emphasize, you know, the opposite texturing. I mean, see that? Look at those shadows like that, those reflections. They're pretty cool like that. Now you can do, if I did a card like this that was flat, I mean, I think this would look like a great card right here. But, you know, you can kind of play around with the format of a card base and like that, and someone opens this card up like this. It's kind of cool. You know, it gives it a little bit of movement and motion. Okay, so let's see right here. Let's go to this. I was mentioning I might do a little tweaks on this right here. Let's put a little of these trees in a little bit of a mist. They already kind of look like they're in mist because I stamped them out lighter. But let's tweak it a little bit more. Let's really kind of emphasize that. So we'll put those trees kind of in the distance like that. But look at this, you know, these horses can be running through the mist. See, I'm putting this on some of their legs, and or part of their legs, I guess. Now look at it. It's like they're running out of the light now, like that, just with a little bit of that pigment down there. Now, if everyone ever tries this, okay, where people always kind of like, I can't do that. It's because they ink up their ink, and it's like their pad is like super, super wet. You know, because it's like people don't use like white pigment ink too often. So you really have to get it where there's barely any ink on your cotton ball. So when you're tapping down like this, it's not leaving big globs of ink. It's like a really light amount. Think of it like you're trying to apply powder, okay? So sometimes people go like this, oh my God, it's a big blob. Well, you just take it off until it becomes like, you know, like you're applying almost like a powdery application, and you have pure control. Or just do a little tap into your pad, blot it off a few times, test it out. And you want it to where, again, you're barely applying any of it. It's only like through 20 taps where you start to see it or something like that. All right. So there you go. A pretty quick card. Let's see. So, I don't know, stamping time is like 35 minutes or something like that. And there. It's pretty fun stuff. And again, like I said, it's kind of dramatic when someone opens it up. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to apply I mean, you can use a tape gun, a tape runner or something like that if you want to, and tape that down. But sometimes when you're doing those things like this, it kind of, tape runner, you know, it feels fairly flat in there. But then sometimes after a while, it's like things are sitting around, it gets a little floppy. So I'd like to use glue. I'm going to use a spray adhesive on here and get a, you know, a good seal in there. And when you do that, what you have is you have your glue on the back here, put it down like this and butt it up against that, and then lay it down and, you know, flatten it out. Then when you have the second piece, you can do the top or the bottom, just lay that in there and butt it up in there like that. And try to get as much of that seam taken care of. Sometimes I do it and it's like, oh, I got a little space in between like that. But if it's black, you can't really see it. If it's white, it kind of stands out a little bit more. I guess it depends what you're stamping out in there and what color the meeting place. And sometimes you see this right here where you get a little of this paper. Sometimes just you don't get it glued down right dead center. See this like has a little bit of that black on the edge like that. What you do is after you get these two components glued down in here, what I do is I fold the piece. Let me see, nothing in here is wet anymore, right? I fold the piece like this. See, this is all sticking out right here too. And what I do is I make things flush so you can take a straight edge and just cut that across. You have a paper trimmer, cut it across, and then cut right here and here if it's sticking out one side or the other. And that makes everything really flush. And you get a really great card. Then you stamp something else out on the outside like this. I'm using black. You can do whatever color you want. And something like this would be kind of interesting to have, I don't know, something that kind of might lead into this piece. Maybe, the horses in white or something like that might be kind of interesting or something. Smaller version, whatever. And then what I do is, the place where you write on this is you write, dear whoever, happy birthday or whatever. Can't wait to, see you again down here in your date. So that's, I use that back portion for my whatever salutations. Okay. Hope you like the card. Thanks so much for watching.